Many of you may have heard of the great Chinese detective Di Renjie, and you may have seen him in C-dramas like Judge Di's Mystery. In modern discussions, we sometimes see Di Renjie described as an ancient Chinese Sherlock Holmes. He is often portrayed as a master of forensic reasoning who cuts through lies and solves impossible cases while the people around him are still asking the wrong questions. He is also one of my favorite people in Chinese history. But technically, the real Di Renjie was not really a detective at all. He was a master of the Tang Code, a fearless judge, and eventually a chancellor of the empire. He didn't track down criminals in the streets. He stood in imperial courtrooms and told emperors to their faces that they were wrong. And the most impossible case he ever helped solve wasn't a murder or a theft. It was the question of who would rule China after the most powerful woman in Chinese history. Hey everyone, and welcome to Tea with Amy. Today, we will look at the legend-filled life of Di Renjie and follow his journey from a young official framed for a crime he didn't commit to a judge who cleared 17,000 cases in a single year, and finally, to the brilliant political strategist who helped shape the restoration of the Tang Dynasty. It is a story of how one man used the weight of the law to guide the power of the throne. The story of Di Renjie begins in 630 CE, in the early years of the Tang Dynasty, during the reign of Emperor Taizong. Di Renjie was born in Ningzhou, modern-day Taiyuan, into a family of established government officials. His grandfather, Di Xiaoxu, had served as a vice director of the Department of State Affairs, and his father, Di Zhixun, served as a prefect. From a young age, Di Renjie was raised to view the Confucian classics and the law as the twin pillars of a stable society. He would eventually marry and have 3 sons, but unfortunately, the name of his wife was never recorded in official histories. What we do know is that they raised 3 sons who would each, in their own very different ways, become part of their father's story. There is a popular historical story about Di Renjie as a child. A clerk was murdered in his family home, while everyone else in the household was being interrogated and frantically trying to prove their innocence. The young Di Renjie remained in his room, calmly reading. When a local official demanded to know why he wasn't helping with the investigation, he reportedly replied, "I'm busy attending to the sages in these yellow scrolls, and I have yet to finish my conversation with them. How could I possibly have time for a common official? And why should I be scolded for it?" The local official was stunned by the child's defiance and total lack of fear. In a world where the mere presence of a government auditor could make grown men tremble, the young Di Renjie remained entirely unmoved. Far from being insulted, the official recognized that this was no ordinary arrogance. He saw a child whose mind was disciplined, with an unshakable moral center. This childhood moment serves as the perfect foreshadowing for his entire career. It proved that even at a young age, Di Renjie believed that the truth found in the law and the classics were far more powerful than the temporary authority of any common official. Di Renjie passed the Imperial examinations in his 20s, and in 659 CE began his career as an assistant judicial officer in Bianzhou. It was here that he faced his first major crisis. He was framed for a crime by another official, and in an era where a single accusation could end a career or a life, he found himself under investigation by a senior official, Yan Liben. Now, Yan Liben was not just a politician, he was one of the most celebrated painters and scholars of the Tang Dynasty, a man known across the court for his eye for talent and character. After speaking with the young Di Renjie and reviewing the evidence, he realized the accusation was groundless. He was so struck by the young man's intellect and bearing that he praised him greatly by saying, "Confucius once said, 'Observe a man's mistake, and you shall know his true heart.' You are truly a bright pearl from a distant shore, a long-lost treasure of the southeast. Following this endorsement, Di Renjie spent the next 20 years working his way through the regional administration. He served as a legal officer and a local administrator in various provinces, gaining hands-on experience with the realities of the Tang Dynasty legal system. He became an expert in identifying the subtle flaws in testimony and the hidden motives of corrupt local gentry. By 676 CE, his reputation as an unbreakable and brilliant administrator could no longer be ignored. He was summoned to the capital, Chang'an, to serve as the vice director of the Court of Judicial Review. This position was a senior judge of the empire, responsible for reviewing the most serious criminal cases in the land. When he arrived, he found the Court of Judicial Review in a state of paralysis. The court was buried under a mountain of cold cases and unresolved appeals that had been ignored for years. Di Renjie understood that behind every dusty scroll was a human life wasting away in prison. He threw himself into the work with an almost frightening intensity, eating and sleeping in his office. And within a single year, he worked through a massive backlog, clearing 17,000 cases. The number 17,000 has been debated by some modern historians who suspect that it may have been an embellishment to praise Di Renjie. But the impact was real and undeniable. Di Renjie became a legend in the streets of the capital. He had proven that he could master the files and the law. But his next challenge would require him to master the emperor himself. By the late 670s CE, Di Renjie was still serving as a senior judge at the Court of Judicial Review when his true test came. Not from a criminal, but from the emperor himself. The case involved a high-ranking general named Chen Shancai. During a routine maintenance mission, the general accidentally ordered the felling of several cypress trees. Normally, this would be a minor administrative error, the kind of thing that earns a reprimand and a fine. But these particular trees were located at Zhaoling, the imperial mausoleum of the recently deceased Emperor Taizong. And to the current Emperor Gaozong, this was not just an accident. It was an act of desecration of his father's resting place. In a fury of grief and rage, Emperor Gaozong bypassed the standard legal procedures and ordered Chen Shancai to be executed immediately. As a judge, Di Renjie was the only official who dared to intervene. He formally protested the accusation, arguing that according to the Tang Code, the maximum penalty for such an offense was dismissal from office, not death. Di Renjie reminded the emperor that the law was the foundation of the empire. If the emperor could break the law to satisfy his personal anger, then the people would have no standard left to live by. According to the Old Book of Tang, he said to the emperor, "Your Majesty has established the laws and displayed them upon the palace towers, ensuring that every punishment, from exile to death, has its proper grade. How can a crime that falls short of capital crime be punished by death? If the law is inconsistent, the people will not know how to move their hands or feet. If your Majesty truly wishes to change the law, then let it begin from this day forward." The emperor's anger started to soften. The logic was sound. If he executed the general, he would be betraying the very legal code that gave his own throne its legitimacy. If he broke the law to satisfy a personal grievance, he would go down in history not as a filial son, but as a tyrant who valued a single cypress tree over the life of a loyal officer. Emperor Gaozong eventually relented, sparing the general's life, and as a reward for his courage, promoted Di Renjie to the rank of attendant censor, giving him formal authority to investigate and challenge official misconduct across the empire. This case became a defining moment. It proved that Di Renjie believed that the law was a sacred contract that even the emperor was bound to honor. As Emperor Gaozong's health declined in his later years, more and more of the actual governing fell to his empress Wu Zetian. After Emperor Gaozong died in 683 CE, Wu Zetian ruled as Empress Dowager and regent for her sons. And as her power grew, the established bureaucracy of the capital became her obstacles. If she wanted to change the direction of the empire, she needed to clear the court of officials who were too deeply rooted in the traditionalist camp. Some officials were purged, but many were simply transferred away. And Di Renjie was sent to a series of regional posts in 686 CE. Moving a high-ranking official like Di Renjie out of the capital was a common political maneuver. It wasn't a formal demotion or a punishment for crime. It was a way to remove a powerful voice from the center of decision-making without making him a martyr. And it was during these regional posts that Di Renjie would build a reputation among the common people that would eventually prove more powerful than any court title. In 686 CE, Di Renjie was serving as the prefect of Ningzhou, a remote posting that was far from the glamour of the capital. And here, we step away from the official historical records for a moment, because what follows is a legend. It comes from the Tang Dynasty collection, the Great Book of Marvels, which contains tales of ghosts, demons, and the supernatural. These stories serve as a fascinating mirror, reflecting the deep-seated beliefs and folklore of Tang Dynasty society. According to legend, when Di Renjie arrived in Ningzhou as the new prefect, the local officials met him with a terrifying warning. The official prefect's residence was a haunted house. Over the previous decades, 10 successive prefects had died within its walls under sudden and mysterious circumstances. The building sat abandoned, overgrown with thorns and weeds, and the local bureaucracy desperately begged Di Renjie to take his lodgings elsewhere. He refused. A righteous official, in his view, had nothing to fear from the supernatural. According to the Great Book of Marvels, he said, if the prefect doesn't stay in his official residence, where else would he stay? He ordered the doors to be opened and the grounds repaired, and stayed there without hesitation. The first few nights brought all manners of strange disturbances. Shadows moved through the empty halls. Strange sounds echoed from the courtyard in the dead of night. Rather than fleeing, Di Renjie stood in the center of the main hall and addressed the darkness directly. If the present was a god, he argued, it should respond to reason. If it was a demon, it could not harm a righteous man. And then, in a fashion of all great detective stories, he noticed a pattern. The disturbances were constantly centered around a single large tree in the western courtyard. He ordered his men to dig beneath its roots. There, they found a skeletal remain of a former official from a previous dynasty, buried improperly, with the roots of the tree having grown through the bones over the decades. Di Renjie ordered a proper reburial with full funeral rites and a ritual offering to settle the soul. According to the legend, the hauntings never returned. As a piece of historical record, this story tells us very little. But what the official histories do confirm is that Di Renjie's tenure as prefect of Ningzhou was a period of exceptional peace and governance. In the end, the story tells us that Di Renjie had a way of walking into a place paralyzed by fear, finding the real source of the problem and fixing it. Whether the problem was a ghost or a governance failure, his approach was identical. But the next challenge waiting for him was far larger than a haunted house. It was a political massacre, and the bodies were real. After Di Renjie's posting in Ningzhou, the political landscape of the Tang Dynasty was fractured by a violent rebellion. In 688 CE, Prince Li Zhen rose in arms against Wu Zetian's power over the throne. The rebellion was swiftly crushed, but the aftermath proved even more devastating than the fighting itself. Hundreds of commoners and minor officials in Yuzhou were arrested and sentenced to death as conspirators. The empress's agent and the military were eager to demonstrate their loyalty through a massive purge. It was into this atmosphere of terror that Di Renjie was appointed as the new prefect of Yuzhou. He arrived to find over 600 people in chains, awaiting execution. The military commander Zhang Guangfu had allowed his soldiers to plunder the region freely, treating the entire population as traitors. Di Renjie did not accept the rebel labels that had been stamped on these prisoners by the military. He did his own investigation and concluded that the vast majority of those in chains had been compelled into joining the rebellion against their will. They were not traitors, they were victims of a civil war. He then did something that took enormous personal courage. As prefect, he sent a secret urgent petition directly to Wu Zetian, arguing that executing 600 innocent people would be a stain on her reign and a catastrophic waste of the empire's people. He told the empress, "If I plead their case openly, it would seem as if I am defending traitors. Yet if I know the truth and remain silent, I fear I would betray your majesty's spirit of mercy." Wu Zetian was moved by his plea and granted his request. She issued a special decree of pardon and changed the death sentence into exile to the border region of Fenzhou. When the pardoned prisoners were being marched toward their place of exile, the route took them through Ningzhou, where Di Renjie had previously served as prefect and where the local people had built a stone monument in his honor. The prisoners clung to one another and wept beneath Di Renjie's stone monument, fasting for 3 days before moving on. Upon reaching their place of exile, they too erected a monument to honor his virtue. This case solidified Di Renjie's reputation as a pillar of justice for the common people. He had proven that a judge's greatest skill was not merely in condemning the guilty, but in serving as a shield for the innocent, even when the swords of the state were already drawn. But after Di Renjie saved the 600 prisoners, the military commander Zhang Guangfu allowed his soldiers to continue pillaging and extorting the local population. Di Renjie officially confronted him, accusing him of being a greater threat to the empire than the rebels they had just defeated. According to the old book of Tang, Di Renjie said, "The one who brought chaos to Henan was only one rebel prince. Now the one rebel is dead, but 10,000 more rebels are being born." Because of this, Zhang Guangfu harbored a deep and bitter resentment and reported to the empress that Di Renjie was arrogant and disrespectful. At the time, Wu Zetian needed to keep her military forces happy and chose to demote Di Renjie to a minor post in Fuzhou. But he would not stay there for long. In 690 CE, just 2 years later, Wu Zetian made a move that shook the entire empire. She deposed her own son, Emperor Ruizong, declared the Tang Dynasty at an end, and founded a brand new dynasty in her own name, the Wuzhou Dynasty. She named herself emperor and became the only female emperor in all of Chinese history. The Tang Dynasty, as Di Renjie knew it, was over. The next year, in 691 CE, Wu Zetian sent a clear signal that she valued competence over court intrigue. She recalled Di Renjie from his minor posts and promoted him to a chancellor position, one of the highest offices in the empire. In making this appointment, the emperor was explicitly recognizing Di Renjie's record of service. She saw that his unwavering dedication to the people and his ability to maintain order through justice were the exact qualities needed to stabilize her new dynasty. By elevating a man whose primary loyalty was to the law and the common good, rather than a political faction, she sought to anchor her government in proven integrity. According to the old book of Tang, Wu Zetian asked him if he knew who had spoken out against him. To which Di Renjie replied, If your majesty believes I have faults, I shall correct them. If your majesty knows I have no faults, then I am fortunate indeed. I do not know the names of those who spoke against me, and I can continue to be friendly with them. Please let me remain in ignorance. It was the response of a man who refused to be drawn into the game of political intrigue. By choosing ignorance, Di Renjie ensured he could lead without a personal vendetta, proving he was an official who served the stability of the empire, not his own ego. But holding the highest office in the dangerous imperial court was not the same as being safe, and Di Renjie was about to find that out. In 692 CE, about a year after becoming Chancellor, Di Renjie ran headlong into the most terrifying instrument of Wu Zetian's reign, her cruel officials. To understand what Di Renjie was up against, we need to talk briefly about Lai Junchen. He was Wu Zetian's most feared interrogator, and a man so skilled at manufacturing treason charges that he literally wrote a manual on the subject, the classic of accusation. This manual taught officials how to construct false charges that appeared logically airtight. Under his watch, chancellors, generals, and members of the imperial family were arrested, tortured into confessing, and executed. The entire court lived in a state of constant terror. This would be known as Wu Zetian's reign of fear. And around this time, Lai Junchen accused Di Renjie, along with 6 other senior officials, of treason. The charge carried the death penalty, not just for the accused, but potentially for their entire families. Di Renjie was put in a dangerous situation. Lai Junchen's method was well known. Those who refused to confess were tortured until they did. Those who confessed immediately were promised that their lives would be spared. Many of the officials around Di Renjie were being broken under interrogation. And so, Di Renjie confessed, immediately and without any torture. Then the official Wang Deshou tried to press the advantage and asked Di Renjie to also implicate another chancellor in the treason charge. Di Renjie refused, and chose instead to strike his head against a pillar until blood covered his face in defiance. His confession had been a calculated sacrifice, a temporary concession to survive the initial interrogation. He knew that it wouldn't actually save his life, regardless of what the cruel officials promised. But it might lower their guard and would buy him the time he needed. He asked for a brush and an inkstone. He tore a strip of cloth from his own blanket and wrote a detailed petition describing his innocence and injustice of the charges against him, and hid it inside the linings of his winter cotton clothes. Then, when the season changed and the weather warmed, he asked Wang Deshou to send the clothes home to his families to have the winter paddings removed. Wang Deshou didn't suspect anything and complied. Di Renjie's second son, Di Guangyuan, found the letter and rushed to the palace to report the emergency. The emperor read the petition and grew suspicious. She summoned Lai Junchen to explain himself. But Lai Junchen was ready. He reported that Di Renjie was being treated well in prison and claimed that Di Renjie has not even removed his official cap and belt. He sleeps in total comfort. Why would he have confessed if he was truly innocent? He then produced a forged letter of gratitude for death, claiming that it was written and signed by Di Renjie himself, expressing gratitude for the emperor's mercy for his execution. It was a forgery, but it was a convincing one. Then, according to later records, another voice reached the emperor. The young son of a previously executed chancellor managed to submit his own petition, warning the emperor about Lai Junchen. According to historical records, he said, "My father is dead and my family destroyed. I only regret that your majesty's laws are being toyed with by Lai Junchen. If your majesty does not believe me, take a trusted loyal official and hand them over to Lai Junchen. No matter who they are, they will also confess treason. With that petition, combined with Di Renjie's own letter, Wu Zetian decided to speak with Di Renjie herself. When Wu Zetian summoned Di Renjie, she asked him, "Why did you confess treason?" He replied, "If I had not confessed, I would have already died under the whip and rod." The emperor asked, "Then why did you write a letter of gratitude for your execution?" "I wrote no such letter," he said. And when she showed it to him, they quickly realized it was a forgery. Once Wu Zetian realized the letter of gratitude for death was a forgery, the case against Di Renjie was seriously undermined, and he was spared execution. But some of the emperor's loyal supporters and even members of the Wu family continued to push for Di Renjie's execution. She did not want to directly dismantle her cruel official system just yet. But she also did not want to execute Di Renjie. So instead, she chose to remove him from power and demoted him to magistrate of Penzhe County. This move satisfied those who wanted Di Renjie gone and kept him alive for future use. In Chinese history, a great official's character is often tested by how they handle a small post after holding a great one. Instead of being bitter, Di Renjie famously spent his time in Penzhe County focusing on famine relief and agriculture, proving he was a pillar of justice regardless of his rank. The emperor had seen exactly who he was, and she did not forget about it. In 696 CE, the northern frontier was set ablaze. The Khitan tribes launched a massive rebellion, capturing the strategic city of Jizhou and its surrounding areas in the Hebei region. The imperial armies sent to stop them were repeatedly defeated, and the local population collapsed into panic. Wu Zetian recognized that military force alone could not stabilize a population that had lost faith in the government. She recalled Di Renjie and appointed him prefect of Weizhou, a nearby prefecture in the same threatened region. What he found there was a city that had been turned into a prison by its own defenders. His predecessor, fearing the Khitan siege, had driven all of the local citizens into the city walls and forced them to labor on the fortifications. The result was a city packed with starving, desperate people who were more frightened of their own government than of the invaders outside. As soon as Di Renjie arrived, he released them all to return to their farms, saying, "The rebels are still far away. Why must we act like this? If they ever reach the city, I alone shall face them. This must not be a burden upon the common people." It was an enormous gamble, but Di Renjie understood that the real collapse was not military, but psychological. The people were starving because they couldn't tend to their crops. They were panicked because their leader was panicking. A city full of hungry, terrified people was easy to defeat. He focused on restoring order and trust, ensuring the people were fed and the soldiers were disciplined. By supporting the people's needs and promising to sacrifice himself to protect them, Di Renjie had united them into a force that turned away the invaders. According to the old book of Tang, hearing of his resolve, the rebels withdrew on their own. The people sang his praises and together erected a stone monument to record his kindness and grace. Shortly after, he was promoted to military governor of Yuzhou. His success in the north made it impossible for the emperor to keep him away from the capital. In 697 CE, Di Renjie was recalled to the capital and restored to the rank of Chancellor. But he saw an empire that was bleeding out. He saw the toll that war took on the people of Hebei, and he grew deeply concerned with the empire's overall military strategy. While the north required a defensive shield, the emperor was simultaneously pouring vast resources into the far west to maintain territories that Di Renjie viewed as a strategic drain. In a bold memorial, he argued that the empire was overreaching. He reminded Wu Zetian that the natural borders of mountains and sand served as the limits intended by heaven. To him, the current borders already exceeded the reach of the greatest dynasties. He warned that exhausting the treasury for barren, uncultivable land was a pursuit of empty glory. He urged the emperor to stop chasing the empty fame of a conqueror and return to the responsibility of protecting the people, warning that those who follow the same tracks as an overturned carriage can never be safe. While she didn't like it, Wu Zetian respected Direnjie's logic. She didn't immediately abandon all of the western garrisons, but she began to scale back the aggressive expansions that had characterized her early reign. She realized that the overturned carriage warning was true. The empire could not fight the north, the west, and maintain internal stability all at once. By challenging the emperor, Direnjie's intellectual honesty forged a bond that was built on trust. While many other officials offered only flattery and submission, Direnjie offered the truth. He was definitely lucky because he could also easily have been executed for insolence. But instead, his competence made him indispensable, and he became one of the people that the emperor trusted the most. In 698 CE, Direnjie was serving his second term as chancellor, and he faced the final and most consequential case of his life. It was a mystery that had no crime scene and no victim, only a question: who would inherit the empire? Wu Zetian was caught between two camps. On one side were her nephews, Wu Sansi and Wu Chensi, who were lobbying fiercely to be named crown prince and arguing that the empire should remain within the Wu family. They argued that since ancient times, no emperor has ever named someone with a different surname as their heir. On the other side were her own sons, the Li princes. One was in exile and the other was in forced seclusion. But their restoration would mean the revival of the Tang Dynasty that she herself had ended. For Direnjie, this wasn't about personal preference or picking a side. It was about legitimacy, dynastic continuity, and the proper heir. According to Chinese imperial tradition, the emperor held power through the mandate of heaven, a divine right that was normally passed down through the ancestral line. Even though Wu Zetian had declared her own Wuzhou dynasty, Direnjie believed that her legitimacy still depended on succession through the Li family. Direnjie reminded the emperor that the empire was founded by the Li family, and that Emperor Gaozong had entrusted his sons to her. He argued that if she passed the throne to another family, then she would be defying the will of heaven. And finally, Direnjie tried to leverage the emperor's legacy after death. He said, "If your majesty establishes your son, then for 10,000 years to come, your majesty will be honored in the ancestral temple, and your lineage will be eternal. But I have never heard of a nephew who, after becoming emperor, enshrined his aunt in the ancestral temple." The arguments from both sides gave Wu Zetian a headache. She tried to dismiss Direnjie's concerns by claiming that succession was a family matter. To which Direnjie cleverly said, "The ruler is the head, and the officials are the limbs. We are of one body. Since I hold the position of chancellor, how could I not be involved?" And finally, there was the dream of a parrot. According to a famous anecdote, the emperor was troubled by a recurring dream that she could not interpret. So she asked Direnjie what it meant. She said, "I dreamed of a great parrot with both wings broken. What does it mean?" Direnjie replied, "The parrot is your majesty's surname. The two wings are your two sons. If your majesty raises up your sons, the wings will soar again." So in Chinese, a parrot is called Yingwu. Direnjie did not engage with the dream as a supernatural mystery. Instead, he used the phonetic overlap of Wu from Yingwu and the emperor's surname, Wu, as a way to guide the emperor towards the conclusion that he himself desired: the restoration of the Tang Dynasty. And in the end, it seems that Direnjie's plan worked. Later that year, Wu Zetian recalled her exiled son, Li Xie, and established him as the crown prince. Now, Di Renjie was almost 70 years old, and he knew that he probably would not be alive much longer to guide the empire. So he looked across the court and identified the men who he believed had the integrity and the resolve to finish what he had started. He recommended dozens of officials for high positions, including his eldest son, Di Guangsi. While we could certainly dismiss this as nepotism, we need to acknowledge the fact that Di Guangsi served well in his past government positions, and even Wu Zetian was impressed. So she appointed him to a position in the Ministry of Revenue. According to the institutional history of Tang, she said, "Like Qi Xi's recommendation of his own family, you have indeed found the right person." Qi Xi was an ancient minister who famously recommended his own family for office without anyone accusing him of favoritism, because the men he chose were simply the best for the position. This was an immense praise for Di Renjie, who has spent his entire life arguing that the right person for the job was the right person for the job, regardless of who was watching. And then finally, when Wu Zetian asked for a recommendation for Chancellor, he recommended Zhang Jianzhi. He said, "If you wish to obtain an extraordinary talent, there is the chief secretary of Ningzhou, Zhang Jianzhi. Though he is old, he has the talent for a chancellor." Considering Di Renjie's recommendation, Wu Zetian appointed Zhang Jianzhi to the position of assistant prefect of Luozhou. And then a few days later, she asked Di Renjie again. And this time, he said, "The one I previously recommended, Zhang Jianzhi, has not yet been employed." The emperor said, "He has already been promoted." He replied, "The one I recommended was to be a chancellor, not an assistant prefect." Eventually, Wu Zetian took his advice and promoted Zhang Jianzhi to a chancellor position. Many of the people that Di Renjie had recommended ended up with high-ranking positions. It reached a point that someone once said to him, "The finest talents of the world all belong to you." And Di Renjie replied, "I recommend the worthy for the sake of the empire, not to build a following of my own." But which empire was Di Renjie referring to? All of the people that Di Renjie recommended were extremely capable and talented officials, but they were also Tang Dynasty loyalists. They were officials that Di Renjie believed were the best for the job, but also the same officials that Di Renjie hoped would one day restore the Tang Dynasty, even if he wasn't there to see it. In September of 700 CE, Di Renjie passed away. His death left a void that could not be filled. Wu Zetian was devastated. She cried and said, "The imperial court is now empty." From that point on, whenever the court faced a great matter that could not be resolved, the emperor would sigh and say, "Why did heaven take away Di Renjie so soon?" But the emperor was only looking at the empty seat. She didn't realize that the rest of the court was already filled with the men Di Renjie had placed there to finish what he started. In 705 CE, 5 years after his death, the very men Di Renjie had recommended, led by the Chancellor Zhang Jianzhi, launched a coup that forced Wu Zetian to abdicate and restore the Tang Dynasty. Di Renjie had done his work, even from beyond the grave. The story of Di Renjie is one of the most enduring in all of Chinese history. By the time the Ming and Qing dynasty storytellers got their hands on him, he had grown into something almost mythological. A master of disguise, a solver of supernatural crimes, a one-man justice system operating in the shadows of a corrupt court. But the real man was, in many ways, more extraordinary than legend. The fictional Di Renjie solves crime with a magnifying glass. The historical one solved them with the Tang Code. He understood that in a world where the emperor's word was absolute, the only force powerful enough to push back was the law itself. And then there was his sons. Earlier I talked about how his second son, Di Guangyue, saved his life, and his eldest son, Di Guangsi honored his name. But what about his youngest son, Di Guangzhao? Well, I didn't forget about him. Instead, I left him for the end because of how far he fell from the tree. Unfortunately, Di Guangzhao is remembered as a greedy and violent official. He was so despised by the people of Weizhou, the very prefecture where his father had been celebrated as a hero, that they torn down the stone monument they had built in Di Renjie's honor. Later stories say that when Di Renjie found out he did not protect his son, he stripped his son of his influence and cut him off. He applied the same standard to his own household that he had applied to the empire. But I think the most fascinating aspect of his life was his relationship with Wu Zetian. He served an emperor who had dismantled the very dynasty he had dedicated his career to protecting, especially with his obsession with the law and the Tang Code. He stood by her side, cleared her cases, defended her borders, and earned her complete trust. But in the end, it seems everything he did was quietly aimed at the restoration of the Tang Dynasty. Was his loyalty to Wu Zetian just a facade in order to finally bring back the Tang Dynasty? We will never know. But what we do know is that everything he did was with the people of the empire in mind. I think that is why he remains so popular today, in every story. Because we all want to believe that somewhere in the world there is a man who has already seen through every lie, who will not bow to the rage of a ruler, and who is always on the side of the ordinary person. What do you think of Di Renjie's legacy? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.